Coming up on Bridge City News, Alberta's health minister discusses action his government is taking to help those in long-term care homes battling the coronavirus. More help is coming to our country's charities as Ottawa announces hundreds of millions of dollars in aid. And with oil now in negative territory, we chat with Dan McTagg with Canadians for Affordable Energy about what that means for our oil and gas sector.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The town of High River has been hit very hard by the novel coronavirus. Fresh off of news that a worker at the Cargill meat processing plant died from the virus, comes word that 2 more deaths were reported at long-term care homes in the region, also from COVID-19. Alberta Health Minister Tyler Shandro says his government plans to bump up salaries, funding, and hiring to help care centres deal with the outbreaks.
To date, 330 cases have been reported at these facilities, with a total of 34 deaths due to the novel coronavirus. We are announcing several new measures to address pressures on our continuing care facilities. Over the coming days, we will roll out a plan which includes the following 3. First, increased funding to hire additional staff so that contracted facilities can address the higher workloads required to prevent infections and respond to outbreaks. Second, a wage supplement of $2 per hour during the pandemic to compensate healthcare aides who provide the majority of care in these facilities. And then third, fast-tracking healthcare aid students through their programs using paid practicums to get more trained staff into our continuing care facilities where they are most needed.
The province says there are 187 new cases of the coronavirus in Alberta, along with 2 new deaths. There were 367 confirmed cases in continuing care facilities. There are also 401 cases at the Cargill meat processing plant in High River, 77 cases at JBS Foods in Brooks, and 20 confirmed cases at the Curl Work Camp at Fort McMurray. Alberta Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. DEENA HINSHAW, says early preventative measures, including social distancing and self-isolating, prevented the virus from becoming a lot worse in our province.
We can think about this virus as a tidal wave that could have swept in and left a trail of destruction behind. This didn't happen because we collectively formed a barrier by our actions to prevent the full force of this wave from striking us. As we start to change our behavior in planning to reopen segments of our society, we need to remember that the potential force of that tidal wave is still there. We will need to keep following core elements of the public health measures for many months to come. Even as we plan to open businesses, we need to seek a balance between minimizing virus spread and ensuring our society can function to support the best mental, physical, and economic health of all of us.
Health officials say the virus will most likely reach its peak in mid-May, with an estimated 820 people requiring hospitalization. Alberta now has 3,095 confirmed cases of COVID-19. When it comes to who to trust during the COVID-19 pandemic, a new poll says Canadians trust their family doctor more than the Prime Minister. The survey asked to rate the level of trust in different people, including health officials like Dr. Theresa Tam, the banks, and politicians. Health professionals had the highest level of trust with 92% support, and public health officials were second at 81%. The poll said only 68% of Canadians trusted the World Health Organization, while 54% trusted Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The poll was conducted by Leger and the Association for Canadian Studies. It surveyed just over 1,500 Canadians between April 17th and the 19th. Healthcare workers across the province have now been ordered to wear protective masks for their safety and the safety of their patients. What happens, however, when the mask itself is faulty? Last week, a shipment of masks sent to Alberta Health Services had nothing but complaints. According to Susan Slade, who is a licensed practical nurse and vice president for the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, these masks should not be purchased from private companies, but instead from a Canadian public healthcare company that meets stricter guidelines.
The main reason for that would be that you have quality control. You can ensure that the quality of the product that you're getting is actually what you're getting. Instead, when you're shipping it on a boat and on a plane and on a wherever else, you're not actually, you don't know what the product is until you get it. To have to wear a mask continuously now for 8, 12, 16 hours, we should be making sure that our healthcare professionals are looked after, not just given whatever they can get off a truck.
15 Lethbridge firefighters responded to a grass fire earlier this afternoon between the Old Man River and the Bridge Valley Golf Club. There was a lot of heavy smoke and residents were asked to avoid the area. No injuries were reported. Firefighters held the fire and there was no risk of it crossing the river. An investigation into the blaze is underway. During the coronavirus pandemic, many people are using hand sanitizer. With the nice weather, we're starting to get outside a little bit more and barbecue. As MICAH QUINN explains, if you're wearing hand sanitizer while you grill or have an open flame out, it could become quite dangerous.
Because of COVID-19, almost everyone is wearing hand sanitizer. But if you're around an open flame, make sure you don't have it on, or this could happen. Most hand sanitizers contain between 60 and 95% alcohol, and it can be very flammable when held near an open flame. I decided to pour hand sanitizer on a plate and see how flammable it would get. I also did the same thing when I put hand sanitizer on a leather glove and lit a flame on it. For my last experiment, I put hand sanitizer on a steel sink and lit a flame near it. These experiments serve as a good reminder to make sure that you shouldn't have on hand sanitizer while barbecuing, and that all it takes is one flame and the hand sanitizer will ignite. For Bridge City News, I'm MICAH QUINN.
So much for those professional manicures and pedicures. The pandemic has brought those non-essential businesses to a standstill. But that doesn't mean that you have to let yourself go. BCN's Loris Alexander spoke with the owner of the Catwalk Salon and Spa on how you can look and feel your best despite the trying circumstances.
As beauty salons have gone dark during the coronavirus pandemic, it has plenty of us, well, feeling dark and our roots gray.
There is a movement of show us your roots, where people are letting their roots grow in. I did not let my roots grow in. At our salon, and a lot of salons are doing this, we're doing professional hair color kits. So you can send us a picture of your roots, or if you're already a client here, we can look it up, and then we can actually sell you the proper hair dye and tools to retouch, to maintain your hair.
It's not just about hair color. Cox has some other beauty tips. Bangs growing out?
Wash and style your hair to how you would have them and cut them like this, up and down, with no tension.
Giving your man a haircut?
Start with a large guard. You can always go smaller. Do not just buzz off the head. Just take it up the side. Oh my gosh, this is scary to give that advice, but just go up. Don't follow the round of the head.
Feel like batting those lashes.
This is a great time just to let your lashes grow back, be strong, be beautiful. Maybe you won't even need extensions after all this.
Hair extensions on the loose.
Do not try to just rip them out or cut them out. And just give your hair a break and then get your extensions back in when this is over.
Cox reiterates that we are indeed all in this together.
I've seen Pink shaved her head. Anderson Cooper showed his bald spot he gave himself with his clippers. I've seen the newscaster's roots coming in. So we are all in this together.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Many churches have been struggling to survive during this COVID-19 pandemic. People are not going to church itself and tithing. Many pastors, including those at the Miz City Church in Lethbridge, are hoping congregants go online to make a donation or offer up a tithe.
It's a very real worry that churches will not survive this. We could be one of those churches. So far, we've been so well supported. Our strength remains. We're confident at this point we'll survive. We know not every church will. There will be churches that, for whatever reason, won't make it. So we're absolutely confident that God is not caught off guard, that He's got this in hand, that He's going to do something wonderful to keep the work of His church continuing, growing. People are looking for hope. We have answers for them. We're going to rise up to this challenge more than ever. I'm confident in the church's ability to do this.
Streets Alive Mission has set up a warehouse with everything from furniture to feminine hygiene products being donated. They partnered with various local agencies to assist the disenfranchised during this difficult time. Ainsley O'Reilly explains how recovering addicts are the backbone behind this operation.
On 1st Avenue South, in between the supervised consumption site and Long and McQuaid Music Shop, sits a warehouse which is temporarily being used by Streets Alive. All are welcome to ring the buzzer and drop off donations.
Some hygiene items, especially feminine protection. We need household goods and we need furniture. And I'm sorry we can't take beds at this time, but we need furniture and household items. That's our really big need right now.
Donations are then given a minimum 3-day waiting period before being sorted and boxed. Streets Alive, alongside the Salvation Army, My City Care, MCC, and Mission Thrift Store, are working together to help agencies who need the materials most. And who's putting all this work in? Members of the Exodus Addictions Recovery Program.
I'm so proud of all our guys that are doing this. And so, yes, it is voluntary, sort of voluntold-y.
I can say this, in all honesty, that Streets Alive is the only place I have felt really comfortable. I love the Christian aspect about it.
Streets Alive says that people in recovery are often demonized. Recovering alcoholic Allan Smith shared his response.
Some of those people that see it that way don't really know themselves. Everybody has positive and negative, but if we work together as we are, through God, miracles happen.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
When it comes to our country's charities, more help is on the way. The federal government announced plans to provide $350 million, with the money flowing through 3 national groups to help Canada's 86,000 registered charities.
Long before this pandemic, charities and nonprofit organizations were doing crucial work to help our communities. Their mission has always been to support people in their time of need, and that hasn't changed. But COVID-19 is putting a tremendous amount of pressure on those organizations because more people need help. For example, back in March, one United Way partner in Winnipeg made and distributed 1,475 emergency kits for families, seniors, and homeless people in just 5 days. Organizations have also had to change the way they deliver services because of the rules that everyone has to follow to keep each other safe.
Government officials say charitable donations will decline by up to $6.3 billion this year. They also say close to 195,000 people who work for charities could be laid off. Our province's Internet Child Exploitation Unit and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection are reminding parents to closely watch their kids' online activity during the COVID-19 pandemic. Officials from the ICE unit say for the month of March, they received a record number of investigative referrals. They received 243 reported instances of online child exploitation in Alberta, far exceeding the unit's 2-year average of roughly 110. Alert CEO Dwayne Lacusta says it's not just children who are spending more time at home, but also sexual predators. He says they're looking to take advantage of the most vulnerable. Annual neighborhood street sweeping will begin this Thursday in Lethbridge. The program will look a little bit different, however, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The biggest change will be a lack of paper.
I'm happy to kick off this year's neighborhood sweeping program under the constraints of COVID-19. We're going to start in the south end of Lethbridge and then move to the west and then the north. This year's program is going to be a little bit different just due to the restrictions in place. What we heard from the community is that ticketing is not really a great option right now, so we are abandoning the ticketing process for this year. As well, we're happy to introduce a new online notification tool that residents can sign up for so they can be notified on their cell phone, email, or by a phone call whenever the neighborhood sweeping is going to be in their neighborhood.
For more information on the annual street sweeping campaign, call 311 or visit the City of Lethbridge website. The cleanup has begun in Peace River, Alberta, where a blocked aqueduct caused flooding in the downtown core. Restaurant owners reported that the water was so high that it was up to their knees at their businesses. Mayor Tim Tarpey says the total damage is likely to come in at just under $1 million. He says flood mitigation measures help to minimize the damage, but he expects the area to be closed for quite some time. Oil prices plunged into negative territory as the coronavirus pandemic keeps people at home and destroys the demand for fuel. The price for U.S. benchmark crude to be delivered in May fell below zero as storage capacity is reaching its limit.
People are driving less. No one's flying anywhere. So we have a lot of extra oil supply that's simply not being used. And that oil has to go somewhere. So if it's not being used, it has to go into storage. But there is a limit to how much oil the world can store.
So what does all of this mean for Canada's beleaguered energy sector? Joining me now to talk about it is Dan McTagg, President of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Dan, how will those in the oil and gas sector survive this?
Well, it's going to be very difficult. And short of any attempt by governments to provide what's known as liquidity, or in other words, be able to cover them for this very brief period of time where the pandemic continues to destroy demand, Canada may very well find itself without its most important and vital commodity sector. Without oil, you effectively will have a grave deal of difficulty trying to get out of the economic straitjacket that we find ourselves in as a result of governments having to borrow massively and deeply to prevent an all-out economic collapse. So what's true of the oil industry also is true of the Canadian economy. It's our lead sector, like it or not. Without oil and without a viable energy sector, it is going to be extremely difficult for any plan to be unveiled that will see us towards some form of economic rectification.
Dan McTagg, President of Canadians for Affordable Energy, thanks for your time today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Hal.
Investigators say a killer's use of a mock police cruiser helped him escape detection as he traveled between 16 crime sprees during a shooting rampage in Nova Scotia on the weekend. Police say the crime scenes include 5 fires where it's feared additional bodies will be found inside of burned homes. The shooter, 51-year-old Gabriel Wortman, was killed after police intercepted him at a gas station.
What are people feeling here?
Devastation. I would say to start with, scary. Never thought that this would happen. Didn't know that that man even could consider. He was a neighbor, he was quiet. But, yeah, well, it's something that it'll never go away. People's lives will have to go in a different direction and all be together, love each other, and support everyone that we can, and just be there.
We had another gorgeous day in southwestern Alberta, lots of blue sky and sunshine. It'll feel even more like summer than spring over the next few days. Complete weather details are coming up. It's feeling more like summer than spring, and with more and more people pulling out their bicycles and motorbikes, please be sure that you keep an eye out for them. Jeanette Roche is here now with a complete look at the forecast. Jeanette, will the warm temperatures be sticking around?
Yeah, well, I certainly think they're going to be sticking around this time, finally. As we look into tonight, we're going to be seeing a few clouds with a low of 4 degrees with a west wind up to 60 km per hour. And into tomorrow, we're going to be seeing some scattered clouds. It's going to be a lovely day, though. 18 degrees is the high, but we could see some wind gusts up to 70 kilometers per hour as well. And then into tomorrow night, a high of 4 degrees. By the way, we're also looking at UV indexes. Now that there's more sunshine, and the UV index for tomorrow is 6 or high. It's kind of fun to be able to say that now, finally, after such a long winter. Looking to our 5-day forecast, 14 degrees is the high for Thursday with a mix of sun and cloud. Lots of sunshine back on Friday and Saturday with highs of 14 and 17 degrees. And then a lovely 18-degree weekend for both Sunday and then into Monday as well, 18 degrees there with a mix of sun and cloud. As we are finally hitting those average temperatures for this time of year, the average high 14 degrees, so we're definitely in that range. Low averages are 0 degrees, and we're definitely higher than that even as we hit our lows overnight. The high temperature on this day was back in 1994, it was 25 degrees, and the low temperature was minus 16, that was in 1967. The sun rose this morning at 6:26 a.m. and it set at 8:34 p.m. So look at that, 14 hours of sunlight. Yes, I'll take it for sure. So let's take a look at tomorrow's highs over on the West Coast. We're going to be seeing some rain in Victoria and Vancouver with highs of 12 degrees there. 14 degrees is the high tomorrow in Edmonton with scattered clouds. Same thing for Calgary, mix of sun and cloud. They're going to be seeing a high of 15 degrees there. And over into Saskatoon, 15 degrees is their high. 16 is the high expected tomorrow in Regina with a mix of sun and cloud across Saskatchewan. And into Winnipeg, finally, they're going to be seeing a lovely 12-degree day as they're finally hitting some double digits there with lots of sunshine. And looking further east to Toronto, 6 degrees is expected tomorrow in Toronto there with lots of sunshine. Possibility of some flurries, though, happening in Ottawa with a high of 3 degrees, and they could see a chance of snow also in Montreal with a high of 1 degree. Fredericton also could see a mix of rain and snow tomorrow, high of 4. Chance of showers tomorrow in Halifax with a high of 6 degrees. We could see some rain showers in Charlottetown as well with a high of 6. And 4 degrees is the high expected tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with lots of sunshine. There you go, Hal. There is your weather.
Today's weather highlights are brought to you by Dan's LA Carpet Cleaning. Residential and commercial carpet and furniture cleaning since 1989.
Businesses that have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic will be able to start applying for the federal government's wage subsidy beginning on Monday. The Prime Minister says the Canada Revenue Agency is setting up a calculator that will let employers see how much they can expect to receive from the program. Federal officials expect to process 90% of applications by the first week of May. That is the point at which funds will begin flowing, which will provide up to $847 per employee per week. Oil prices are continuing to collapse as traders anticipate demand for energy to shrivel because of the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. The world remains awash with an oversupply of crude, just as demand is suffering a huge pullback. A barrel of oil to be delivered in May was trading this morning at just under $4 a barrel a day after oil futures plunged below zero for the first time. Brent crude, the international oil standard, fell near 22%. We will have the final market number for West Texas Intermediate coming up in just a moment. Coca-Cola's global volume has tumbled 25% this month as the coronavirus pandemic gripped so much of the world population. Those volumes, which include product that Coke sells to theaters, restaurants, stadiums, and music venues, were humming earlier this year. The results reveal how fast the virus has impacted commerce. Subaru is recalling over 200,000 cars and SUVs in Canada and the United States due to a problem with their fuel pumps. The recall covers certain 2019 Impreza, Outback, Legacy, and Ascent vehicles. The company says their low-pressure fuel pumps can fail and cause engines to stall. Subaru says the fuel pumps will be replaced free of charge starting in early June. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The markets took another beating today. The TSX was down 448 points to 13,940. The Dow was down 632 points to finish the day at 23,018. The S&P 500 was down 87 points to 2736, and the Nasdaq was down 298 to finish the day at 8263. Oil was down 731 to 13.12 per barrel. Natural gas was down 10 cents to $1.83. Gold was up $1.85 to $16.8805 an ounce, and silver was down a cent to $14.88 an ounce. Wheat is at $245 per metric ton. Barley's at $239. Canola's at $458. And corn is at $243 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.93 to $93.50. Feeder cattle were down 43 cents to $118.25, and lean hogs were up $3.68 to $44.35. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to $70.39 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, when it comes to helping out our country's charities, help is on the way. The federal government announced plans to provide $350 million with the money flowing through 3 national groups to help Canada's 86,000 registered charities. There are estimates that charitable donations will decline by up to $6.3 billion this year, and as many as 195,000 people who work for charities could be laid off. So how should Christians approach the coronavirus pandemic? Some churches in the States are ignoring government orders not to hold services with mass gatherings. Dr. Michael Brown is a professor, radio host, and author of When the World Stops. He says believers should really honor the wishes of their government, especially during a pandemic. BCN's Paul Arthur has that interview with Dr. Brown in just a moment.
The coronavirus pandemic has shaken the world, causing sickness and death and shutting down the global economy, creating widespread fear. How should we be responding to this as Christians? Joining us today is Dr. Michael Brown, host of the nationally syndicated Line of Fire radio program and author of a new book called When the World Stops. That's available online at askdrbrown.org. And Dr. Brown, good to have you with us.
Thanks. Great to be with you during this very unique season.
Yeah, sobering times that we are living in, absolutely. Why don't you first of all, just off the top, give us a brief snapshot of your brand new book?
Yeah, I was stirred to write this in the midst of the crisis. I felt that God was saying something to his people during this time. We had so many questions. What about faith? What about wisdom? What about obeying the government? What does this mean to us as a church? So I was stirred to write this, contacted a publisher and said, do you want to get a book out now? And basically started the book on March 18th. The book was finished 8 days later and is now out today on Tuesday, April 21st, amazingly enough. And you could say that there are two fundamental messages that come through every page of the book. One is fear not. We must not be in a state of panic. As God's people, panic is not appropriate. And no matter what's happening, no matter how great the upheaval, fear not. And the other fundamental message coming through every page of the book is wake up. I believe God is seeking to get our attention. I believe this is meant to be a divine reset time. I believe the goal is not to go back to life as normal. Things should be different when we come through the other end of this crisis.
Well said. Yeah, there's a lot of fear out there. Lots of speculation, too, as to who or what caused or sent this virus. And there's, of course, a lot of information, tons of it, and misinformation going on around this. Any thoughts on how we can sort all of that out?
Yeah, I actually solicited from hundreds of thousands of Facebook and Twitter followers, what are some of the wildest conspiracy theories that you're hearing? And then I pulled out a bunch of them and put them in one of the chapters in the new book, When the World Stops. And it is mind-boggling. Every day, through the day, I'm sent video after video, link after link. You need to look at this. You need to see this. You need to know what's behind this. And look, bottom line, right now, we don't know if this is a totally natural phenomenon. We don't know if this started in a lab in China. We don't know if the devil is behind this. We don't know if God said it. And just in terms of factual information that we have. But the key thing is not to try to figure out all of those things, but rather to say, what is God saying in the midst of this? And how can I respond practically? Look, if I'm driving down the road and suddenly the rain starts pouring, my thought is not, what caused this thunderstorm? My thought is not, is this due to natural climate change, or is this man-made, or is this an attack from Mars? No, I turned the windshield wipers on. We don't need to get caught up with every conspiracy theory now. The question is, how do we live practically in the midst of this? And what can we learn as God's people in the midst of this?
I'm glad you shared that. People need to hear what you just said. Yeah, turn on the windshield wipers, focus on the driving, and leave the other stuff for, hey, government specialists, they can figure that out, right? So, some of us are asking if this pandemic could possibly be the final plague talked about in the book of Revelation. Now, of course, the Bible's not full of conspiracy theories, it's full of truth, but, we need to sort that out as well. Is that happening now? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was the very first thing I wrote, March 2nd, the very first article I wrote on this, which is now part of the book. No, this is not the end of the world. This is not one of the plagues for the book of Revelation. You say, well, how can I be so sure? Okay, number one, if it was one of the plagues from the book of Revelation, it would be accompanied with a message of repentance. There would have been warnings, this is coming. The church would be speaking to the world and saying, God is judging the world, wake up. That's not what happened with this virus. The second thing is that it's not on the level of a plague from the book of Revelation. Listen, if it was one of the judgment plagues from the book of Revelation, quarantining wouldn't help, there'd be no vaccine, there'd be no cure, and we wouldn't just be measuring tens of thousands of lives lost. It would be far more severe. So I do believe that there'll be a shaking at the end of the age beyond anything we've seen. I have a whole chapter on that one day the whole world will be shaken. But let's put this in its right context. We're not going to have the number of casualties, say, that we had from the Spanish flu or from plagues in the past, the Black Plague in the Middle Ages and things like this. So this is serious. This is deadly. It's definitely something God is speaking through, but let's not exaggerate it.
Yeah, for sure. And another question that follows on the heels of that one, people are asking, are we in the final days before the return of Jesus?
Well, if you want to look at biblical prophecy, maybe you could say we're in the period called the beginning of sorrows. I want to say this. I came to faith in 1971 as a heroin-shooting, LSD-using, long-haired, Jewish hippie rock drummer. And we were told then, it was 1971, this is it. The end is near. All the prophecies had come to pass. Remember Hal Lindsey's famous book, The Late Great Planet Earth, and Jerusalem back in Jewish hands in 67. And clearly the cultural revolution of the 60s, this was the final apostasy. And all the prophecies were lining up. Well, that was almost 50 years ago. I was 16 then. Our oldest granddaughter is in college at the age of 18, 19 now. So we don't want to exaggerate things. And yet we want to look at what Jesus said. And he says in Matthew 24 and Luke 21 that you'll hear wars, rumors of wars, that there'll be famines, earthquakes in different places, even mentions pestilences. He says all these are the beginning of sorrows, the beginning of birth pangs. But then he says, but the end is not yet. So on the one hand, we've been in the period called the last days since Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. And every day we're getting closer to the end. But are we in the final seconds? Is this pandemic a sign that we're in the final seconds? In my view, no. But maybe in the period called the beginning of sorrows.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And as you put right out in the book, there's a need for wisdom and faith, right? So how do we balance the needs of our family along with the faith needed to live for Christ in this time of crisis?
Right, so there's a difference between faith and presumption. Presumption willingly puts itself in harm's way and says, God will protect me. That's what Jesus says is putting the Lord to the test, and that we shouldn't do. So, for example, there's one pastor, a loved, respected man in his community, and he called his church together, defied the government guidelines, said, God is bigger than this virus. We're in a church that believes in healing, encouraged folks to hug each other, said, look around, there are more than 10 people here. Well, tragically, he's now passed away. He's with the Lord now, but he died of that very virus. They haven't had the funeral service yet, at least last I read, because 4 other family members are battling with the virus. As wonderful as this man may have been as a servant of the Lord, that was presumptuous to do that. Proverbs 22:3 says this, that a shrewd man sees danger coming and hides. A naive man runs ahead and pays the penalty. So when your kids have chicken pox, you keep them home on a Sunday morning, lest you get the other kids infected. It's not a lack of faith. It's what's called wisdom. So I have faith that God's going to be with me no matter what. The opening chapters of the book, fear not, and then how to overcome your fears. The last chapter of the book deals with Psalm 91, opens up the Hebrew text of Psalm 91, a psalm of protection and promise. So I'm taking refuge in the Lord. I'm living without fear, without panic. At the same time, I'm seeking to exercise practical wisdom and also to love my neighbor as myself. I do not want to use my presumption to get infected. I don't even know it, and now I infect my neighbor. I want to step higher. And as long as the safety guidelines don't go too far or not oppressive and unnecessary, then I'm going to honor them for the sake of those around me.
Yeah, it's like people are taking, scriptures like, do not forsake the assembling of the saints. Okay, we were supposed to submit to government authorities, and yet, of course, we have a higher authority, God, but there's a fine line there. We can still gather online, so we're not, disobeying the Lord. We need to get a proper perspective on this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. First, do you ever take a vacation? When you take a vacation, it is okay to not go to a church service on a given day. And you're exactly right. Why do we have to gather in a building? I love church buildings. I love gathering in buildings. I love big meetings. But I think God wants to say something to us through this. I've got a chapter in the book, What is Church and How Do We Do It? Maybe there are things he wants to speak to us about community in different ways, or getting every member of the body activated and involved, so it's not just kind of an audience mentality that we have. And yes, we can assemble together online in so many different ways. What I'm concerned about is the attitude of the government's not going to tell me what to do. That should not be the attitude of a follower of Jesus. The attitude of a follower of Jesus should be, I honor and respect the government and will submit to government guidelines unless the government tells me to disobey God, unless the government is guilty of overreach. So I have a whole chapter in the book. I lay out the arguments about pushing back and when we should. And look, when Mayor de Blasio in New York City made the statement that if a church or synagogue defies the meeting ban, that they could be closed for life, permanently shut down, I raised my voice, others raised my voice, and you have no right to do that. That's unconstitutional. There's no justification for it. Well, of course, he walked back from that. He had to. So where you have government overreach or churches being singled out, that's one thing. But look, I'm not getting persecuted as a follower of Jesus when they're shutting down the movie theaters, the restaurants, the bars, the strips clubs, the mosques. You know, how can I think, well, they're persecuting me? Where there is discrimination against churches, that's one thing. But basically, what the government's asking us to do is in the best interest of the society. They may not be getting everything right or wrong. The government never gets everything right all the time. But our attitude should not be defiance. Our attitude should be compliance, unless, as you say, it's telling us to disobey the higher authority, in which case, with all respect to the government, we say, I'm sorry, I have to obey God rather than man.
For sure. Now, you also have a bit of advice on caring for our health. I mean, you know, Scripture does talk about that as well. Any thoughts on how we can properly, you know, just practically speaking, steward our bodies during this time?
Yeah, look, the number one antidote to this virus is a healthy immune system. And here's what strikes me as ironic. We are going through these extreme measures, I mean, potentially crippling the economy. And the whole world changed around it. Sports canceled, Olympics postponed, weddings canceled, funerals held off. I mean, just, we've never been through anything like this. And we're doing it for the sake of saving lives. But we could save a lot more lives if we put the French fry down, if we put the burger down, if we put the chocolate ice cream down. We could save a whole lot more lives every single year than we're saving through the virus. And look, I was the poster boy for unhealthy eating for 59 years. I wasn't a glutton. I was just a lifetime unhealthy eater. I used to have Oreos for breakfast as a boy. I was a chocoholic. I could eat pizza and pasta every day for year after year after year after year. And about 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago now, God really dealt with me and convicted me and helped me to make a radical lifestyle change to only eat healthy foods all the time. And it has absolutely, totally, completely transformed my life. I've literally been getting younger every year. My blood test health results are absolutely off the charts.
Okay.
And my immune system's stronger than ever. Yeah. So I'm a living witness to say, hey, change can come. I'm a living witness to say that we can make a difference. So I'm encouraging folks, and it's in the book, take care of your body. Look, for yourself, for your families, for those you minister to, we need you around. And if you'll take care of yourself now, you'll be able to help others, be there for your family, and have the number one antidote to this virus, a healthy immune system.
Yeah, it's wisdom, absolutely. And God gives us wisdom and the tools to do that. Running out of time here, but I'd love to hear your thoughts here. I mean, you touched on it earlier. You know, once this pandemic is over, you know, will our society just go back to normal, or will there be some permanent changes? Will the church, you know, change, stay the same, or will again, you know, will there be some kind of a shift that takes place? I think something needs to shift, right?
Yes, sir. I'm hoping this is a time of divine reset, personally and corporately. On a personal level, let's use this time. If we're forced home, if we don't have the normal distractions, use it for family, use it for ourselves. Ask questions. What does it really mean to live in the light of eternity? What should our priorities be? Let this be a divine reset, and then maybe have a weekly reset, a Sabbath of sorts, to step back and evaluate what really matters so we don't just get caught up in the rat race. As for church, we don't just want to go back to normal because we needed to do better than normal. Our culture is suffering around us, and the church needs to be in a better place. So this is a great time to say, Lord, how can we activate every member of the body? How can we move beyond a spectator Christianity and see an energized, enabled body making a difference? And how can we be more fervent in prayer and repentance and really seeking God for a great awakening? My fear is that we're going to go back to normal. My hope is that we're going to come out better than normal.
Yeah, God definitely is trying to get our attention here, I think. So let's do our part to cooperate. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Much appreciated.
Always great to be with you.
You bet. Dr. Michael Brown. He's the author of a brand new book called When the World Stops. You can pick up a copy at askdrbrown.org.
China is dismissing claims that the novel coronavirus originated in one of its labs. Instead, China's Arabic TV is suggesting the virus originated in the United States. To talk more about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, who are we to believe?
Right. Surprise, surprise that the Chinese would now put out this propaganda that this virus started out in the United States. This is obviously one of its media channels. It's an Arabic station. Have we heard this before? Absolutely. They're just turning it right back at us. But in the meantime, where are the answers? And the question to the Chinese is, all right, if it wasn't produced in a lab, if this were to be an accident, did it really start in a wet market? Was it really animal to human? Where are the records as to how it started? Where's the research that's being conducted? Where are the answers to the many questions that people have all around the world? It's not just this, ping pong between the United States and China. This goes, Australia is asking for answers now, and so is all of Europe and everywhere else. This is really affecting everyone. No one is immune to this virus. It's all over the world. And to the Chinese, if you are innocent, then give us some answers. Give us some real statistics. Give us some genuine science as to what happened and how we can best prevent this from going any further, or to stop it at the very least, or perhaps give us some ideas as to the origins of what this exact strand was.
Well, White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro said recently that it's incumbent on China to prove that the lab in Wuhan played no role in the coronavirus outbreak.
Exactly, right? So if it wasn't produced in a lab, if you don't want the conspiracy theories to continue to be told and reported on, then where are the answers? In the United States, and I'm sure that's the same thing in Canada, I speak about the mainstream media as a place where, the idea that this virus was produced in the lab was a conspiracy theory. It was only on Facebook, it was only on Instagram, it was only told among friends as a joke that this was created in a lab. As we go further and further from November, the time in which this virus originated, and we started reporting on cases in China, since then it's become more of a thing. It's gained momentum because we don't have answers. So the conspiracy fills that space, and maybe no longer is a conspiracy. It's an actual viable hypothesis as to what happened. And I think in this case, since we're not getting answers, we have real media outlets asking, is there a chance? Is there a possibility that this was actually produced in a lab?
It appears as though the coronavirus has dealt a gut punch to the illegal drug trade, Lisa. Many drug traffickers who rely on chemicals from China to make methamphetamines, fentanyl, are seeing a short supply during the pandemic.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I've never done drugs in my life, any type of drug, but the first thing I thought about when this started spreading is this is really going to affect drug trade, right? Talk about closed borders. You talk about people can't leave their homes. You talk about the quarantine. You talk about the supplies necessary to create some of the world's most profitable and popular drugs, like you said, meth and fentanyl. And these are created in Wuhan. Of course, all of the ingredients of almost all the things that we use, most random items, most expensive items, cheapest items, just go looking around your home and look at all your basic goods. They're all made in China, and drugs are no exception to that. So that the drug market is taking a big hit, and drug dealers, unfortunately, will have to look for business elsewhere.
A new report says the mafia in Italy is taking advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic by making itself look pretty good by providing everyday necessities in poor neighborhoods and offering credit to businesses on the verge of bankruptcy.
Doesn't this sound familiar? That's exactly what terror organizations do, like Hamas, like the Muslim Brotherhood. They go into places and they take over. They become the godfather. In this case, it's pun intended, right? So it is the Italian mafia that is saying, look, we'll pick up the slack. We know that people are suffering. They're making themselves come up from from their hiding places and saying, we can become a visible part of society because we can help you. We can help you with your businesses. We can help you, recover many of the things that you've lost. And Italy, as we know, can definitely use the help. The businesses are suffering there. People are suffering there. So, I think that people are going to become, or at least warm up to the idea. In the short term, in the long term, what happens? The mafia gains influence. Not only the mafia, you have all types of groups gaining influence in this time. It's a time where people can really take advantage of other people's vulnerabilities. You can talk about cyber hacking as well. In this case, terrorists are online, right? Because they know that people are vulnerable. If your bank account gets hacked, who are you going to call? It's going to take you hours before you can find someone at your bank who's going to get on the phone and help you. So unfortunately, it's a time that many of the bad guys are taking advantage of good people.
Now, there was a little bit of good news in Italy as that country saw its fewest coronavirus deaths in a week, but it still recorded 431 deaths on Sunday, but the daily death toll prior to that was closer to 600.
Right, so it's relative, right, in all places, including Italy. So Italy having the huge numbers that they had, the statistics were so alarming all around the world. They looked to Italy as, the example of we need to flatten the curve because we don't want to have the surges that Italy had. Unfortunately, New York did have that type of surge as well. But it looks as though Italy is on its way down. What we're told and what I'm hearing from Dr. Fauci, the expert on this case and someone who's very well quoted here in the United States, is that on the way down after the surge is going to be a very slow decline. So while it was a very fast upward spring to the climax of this, it's going to come down very slowly. So day by day, we're looking at those numbers and we're hoping that they're going to decrease and hopefully very soon. So if we're looking at Italy and we're looking at those numbers come down, we're hoping that New York and other places, they experience the same thing.
Now, still in Europe, Spain saw its fewest daily deaths in nearly a month as the government there is relaxing quarantine restrictions on kids.
Yes. So Spain is a very interesting case. They didn't have the apparatus, the medical apparatuses to serve the number of affected people there. But at the same time, they kind of flirted with the idea of opening up their economy again, having young people and children go back to their daily activities, to not allow the rest of the nation to fall because of COVID-19. They did this. And at the same time, the headline was kind of like, Spain reopens, but they're seeing the highest numbers they ever saw. So it was kind of bad timing with regards to opening back up. But now those two numbers are going further apart, meaning that they're opening and they're seeing more people come out, but the deaths and the number of fatalities is also coming downward. So it's a good thing. They decided to go back to life as usual. Many other nations, including the United States, is dealing with the same idea of having a rollout, having some sort of plan to slowly put people back to work, back to school, and get things rolling again. We talk about the side effects of COVID-19 in only a medical realm. We don't talk about it from a psychological and economic point of view, where people are going to be homeless, people are going to be bankrupt. We're talking about big corporations shutting down. When we talk about big corporations shutting down, those are people's livelihoods, people's jobs, but also think about the mom and pop shops and businesses that cannot sustain this closure. It's gone on long enough.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he's willing to give financial aid to Iran to help fight the coronavirus. Lisa, that's quite the goodwill gesture. Has he said how much?
It is, but Iran kind of passed up the offer and said, no, thank you. Very interesting push and pull between the Iranian regime and Donald Trump. As we know, ever since Donald Trump came into office, he actually campaigned on ripping up the deal between Iran and the United States. And ever since that, it's set a very competitive and harsh tone, flexing of the muscles between the United States and the Iranian regime. And obviously with COVID, the Iranian regime's goal here is to prove that the sanctions put on by the United States is the single most detrimental aspect of fighting coronavirus in that country. Meanwhile, we know where the money goes. All the money that they've received has gone to fighting in Iraq and Lebanon and all their nefarious activities in the region, and not to the people, not to the hospitals, not to the places that they need it. So we need some straight answers from them as well.
Here's a big surprise. Russia recently saw a record number of COVID-19 cases in one day, 6,060 cases over the last 24 hours. Incredible.
Yeah, Russia was one of those cases where people would be like, wait a minute, if this spreads like wildfire, how come Russia's not been affected? Likewise, why hasn't North Korea been affected? Well, these are countries where are we getting the truth? Are we getting a honest and transparent and free press that's telling us what's going on in these places? With regards to Russia, it's interesting because they closed up pretty quickly and made sure that doesn't go as far as it did in other places in the world. But as you cited, that's a very, very large number. The surge hit them right away. And we're hoping that it comes down just as fast as it went up. But they do now have many cases of coronavirus, and they are dealing with it at the moment.
Less than a day after U.S. President Donald Trump mentioned he received a nice little note from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, the remote country denied any recent correspondence between the two.
Yes, so leave it to Kim Jong-un to always embarrass Donald Trump publicly and say, you know what, we're not that close. But then again, he's, it's this push and pull between the two looking for a headline. And I speak about both of them looking for a headline. With regards to Donald Trump, did he get a letter? Maybe, maybe not. What Donald Trump's attempting to do is to say, look, I know we're busy fighting coronavirus. I know that's the only thing in the headlines. But we've done some great work with regards to foreign policy. And I'm not going to let the end of my first term as president be COVID-19. It's going to be other things. And let me remind you the things that I've done. I've curbed Iran. I've put sanctions on them. Look at them. They're suffering. They're crippled. I warmed up ties with Kim Jong-un. And let me just put that in there. So this was at a briefing about coronavirus, which we have here in the United States every single day. And it kind of just put it in there that, I also got a note from Kim Jong-un. Things are still good, and we're still friendly, and he's still a nice guy, and all that. So it's neither here nor there, as we say.
Lisa, there were more protests in Hong Kong as 15 people were taken in and arrested. The U.S., Britain, and Hong Kong condemned the arrests of democracy advocates.
Yes, this is, China not allowing Hong Kong to take advantage of this time period. We actually talked about how, COVID-19 allowed China to get away with many things, and one of them was to get the protesters off the streets in Hong Kong. It quieted them down for a while. And remember, I know how you always ask me about Hong Kong, about the protesters. It's something that you've always kept the attention on, which is wonderful because they never gave up. And it was a very, very unique movement that it showed the momentum. It showed the disenchantment of the people in Hong Kong, and it showed that this is their one chance to prove to the world that they want free. They want to break free from China, and now they're back. They didn't forget, and the Chinese is not going to. The Chinese don't want to allow them to have that opportunity to rise up again, to organize once again, to get out onto the streets once again. They want to control this better this time around. And they've had time to think about it. They've had time to strategize, and they won't allow the people of Hong Kong to protest the way that they were doing.
Lisa, let's talk about what happened here recently in Canada, Nova Scotia, the mass shooting, the worst in Canadian history. 18 people and counting found dead, including the gunman shot by police at a gas station. The mass shootings, the worst in Canadian history, surpassing École Polytechnique from 1989 in Montreal when 14 women were slaughtered. What's the reaction been like in the United States?
Yeah, my condolences first and foremost to the people in Canada, to the families that were affected, to their loved ones. This was so startling. I just saw the breaking news alert on my phone, and I was startled for many reasons. First, you don't hear much of, ever, like you said, it's been, decades since we've heard of a shooting, a mass shooting of this caliber in Canada. You just don't hear these kinds of stories there, and you don't want to. It's almost, it feels, everyone feels a bit violated to hear of a place that's so peaceful and so quiet experience something of this level. Secondly, it's a time where, at the very least, where the entire world is in facing something so chaotic, and unified in that chaos, and unified in this pandemic, that something like this should happen, that people should have to deal with something other than just trying to stay healthy, trying to stay safe, trying to keep their loved ones free and safe from coronavirus. And I think that is what really makes this even more devastating than the actual numbers, and the actual scenario, than the actual story of who this gunman was, what his agenda was, why he did what he did, and why he took all those innocent lives with him. And again, my condolences to the people involved in all of this. This is awful. I know that it really shook the world when this happened yesterday.
And it always surprises me as well, when you talk to the witnesses, people that knew the man, this Wardman, 51-year-old denturist in Nova Scotia, he was such a nice guy. He was humble, gentle. I just had my dentures worked on a couple of months ago. He didn't say anything about this. It just blows my mind how, people say such wonderful things about this serial killer, right?
Right.
And a lot of these were targeted hits.
Right. There were targeted hits. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered here before anyone can really pass any judgment. And unfortunately, what happens in these mass shootings is that there's such an urge to politicize this, to either talk about gun control, to talk about mental illness, to talk about, workplace violence, to talk about terrorism, to talk about Islamic extremism, to talk about so many different things, and to put a label on it right away, and to really just focus in on that label. Political labels aside, in this case, it looks like, as you said, mental illness is a real thing, and it looks as though when someone leads such a normal, quote unquote, normal life, and then something like this happens, what snaps in that person? What causes that person to do that the next day? And then you think about your own life and how many people you deal with on a daily basis. How trusting we are of everyone around us, and what risk we take in just living our mundane lives. And again, all of this in the backdrop of the world dealing with a horrific pandemic. So, I think that it's something that we will talk about probably for days and weeks to come. What was the agenda here? Who was he? And maybe we'll never know. Look at the Las Vegas shooting. We still don't have answers to that. And so many, again, innocent lives taken in every single one of these shootings. When this happens, your loved one goes home and you don't see them again. And I think that's really what we should focus in on, at least for now.
Yeah, and you're right, the investigation continues and we may never know. Lisa, stay safe, and thanks for joining me today from LA.
Likewise.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.